So good morning, everyone, and welcome. It's great to have you all with us as we talk about a major investment in our violence prevention programming. I am Vanessa Garrett Harley. I serve as the Deputy Managing Director for Criminal Justice and Public Safety for the City of Philadelphia. In this position, I've seen our many dedicated teams respond to the tragedies we see taking place on our streets. Young lives are lost and completely robbed of their potential. Injured shooting victims live with trauma, even if they fully recover from their injuries. Others, sadly, do not. In January of this year, we stood in this very room and announced the launch of the Philadelphia Roadmap to Safer Communities, a comprehensive set of short and long-term strategies and goals to guide us in tackling the public health emergency that is gun violence that we see in our city. We know that even after police investigators have left the crime scene, grief and pain remain long afterwards for reeling communities with open wounds, or in some cases, reopen wounds that need time to heal. The investments our team will announce today will help with that healing and rebuild the sense of safety and community that violence can too easily rip away. These investments will also help us get to the root cause of some of these violent acts. They will help us with an immediate trauma-informed response that provides needed support to those impacted by the violence. Cleaning and sealing of the abandoned houses where bad actors might stash guns, and cutting down of overgrown lots where a suspect might hide stolen property, money, or even themselves. The Kenney administration is working with our partners and community leaders on the front lines, and today we mark a next step. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our leader, who is not waiting for his second term to start before taking that step. He's on it right now. Please welcome Mayor Jim Kenney.
Thank you, Vanessa, and thank you all for being here today. As we approach the start of our second term and prioritize issues that need further investment and focus, it is clear that continuing to address the issue of gun violence, which tears at the fabric of our communities, will be our top priority. So thank you to Council President Clarke, Councilmembers Jones and Johnson, Councilmember Blackwell, and Councilmember Quiñones for being here today. We share City Council's sense of urgency to curb the senseless gun violence that all too often, particularly in recent weeks, has claimed innocent children. We continue to work towards implementation of the Philadelphia Roadmap for Safer Communities, the comprehensive 5-year anti-violence plan that we unveiled in January. Yet even as we do so, all of us in city government, including our colleagues in City Council, recognize the need for additional and immediate steps to address this urgent issue. So in a few minutes, you'll hear details from Managing Director Brian Abernathy about 2 initiatives that we are moving forward on as quickly as possible. I'm confident that these programs will benefit those residents most directly affected by the scourge of gun violence. One is aimed at preventing crime, a strategy known as focused deterrence, or group violence intervention that has proven effective here before and in other cities. As you may know, this isn't the first time the city has moved an initiative like this forward. Previous efforts led to mixed results. Our administration is committed to trying again because we are convinced that it can make a difference. The second initiative is focused on helping neighborhoods after significant incidents of violence. When gunfire breaks out, when deaths occur in living rooms or in porches and in the street, even those not struck by bullets are affected. They need our help. The city will now deploy rapid response teams that will lend immediate support to those caught quite literally in the crossfire. In a moment, Brian Abernathy will tell you more about both group violence intervention and rapid response. To be clear, I am not standing here today telling you that these 2 efforts alone will solve the issue of gun violence, but they are part of a larger plan to address gun violence as a public health issue. One of the basic principles of the Roadmap for Safer Communities is that there is no single answer to gun violence, particularly in light of the state's refusal to allow for any meaningful gun restrictions. Let me emphasize that again. In light of the state's refusal to allow for meaningful gun restrictions, AK-47s should not be in the hands of civilians. They are called military assault weapons. They should be in the hands of military only and not civilians. We need to address this with a wide range of initiatives like the successful Community Crisis Intervention Program, which puts credible messengers overnight and on weekends in hotspots to de-escalate incidents before gunfire breaks out. Because our children should be able to sit in their living rooms and watch cartoons without worrying about being struck by bullets flying through their front windows, more than anything, we need to focus on violence as a symptom of a larger crisis of pervasive poverty in Philadelphia. I believe to my core that reducing poverty will reduce gun violence. Increasing education will reduce gun violence. Having people trained to be able to go to work instead of selling drugs will reduce gun violence. And the removal of guns and the proliferation that we have in this city coming from surrounding counties and other states will reduce gun violence. We've taken more guns off the street in the last 4 years than ever before. And those guys go to Bucks County and out in Berks County and other places and buy bags of guns without any need to prove who they are, to prove that they don't have a record. It's absolutely horrendous what's happening in the state, what's happening in surrounding states, and it all comes downhill and affects us here. And our administration will dedicate its next 4 years to doing all of these things. And I just want to thank, yesterday was a long day, and we're here today to start off the second term. But I am so frustrated that both the federal government and the President of the United States hugs the Second Amendment, the state legislature hugs the Second Amendment, and we allow AK-47s on our streets. I mean, it's horrible. Our citizens are at risk, our police are at risk, and we need to stop it, and we need to turn it around. So, Brian, you up?
Good morning. I'm Brian Abernathy. I'm the city's managing director. I just want to say that the work that Vanessa and our public safety team are doing, especially its overall commitment to rapid response and healing, is critical, and I appreciate her leadership. And that's exactly why we're here today, is to build on top of that work. First, we are pleased to say that we're working with the District Attorney's Office and other partners to launch the Group Violence Intervention in Philadelphia program. This is a crime reduction strategy zeroed in on the highest risk individuals in hotspots, including repeat offenders and drug dealers, and builds on the focused deterrence model that the city employed a few years ago. The strategy involves targeted outreach to high-rate offenders, offering incentives for compliance and swift consequences for criminal activity. The administration is committed to funding this approach and plans to implement the program this spring in West Philadelphia. Today, we're also announcing that the administration has sent to City Council a request for appropriations for more than $5 million to expand our efforts around violence prevention. Included in that request is funding for group violence intervention. Also included is funding for the rapid response efforts that Mayor Kenney touched on. Communities that witness gun violence need immediate support, particularly in the wake of incidents where there are multiple victims of a particularly tragic incident, such as the murder of 4 residents in one West Philadelphia home last month, or where the victims are children. The shootout on 15th Street marked the first mobilization of city resources in this way, and we've continued to mobilize when tragedy strikes. Team members include representatives of various city agencies who provide immediate trauma support, direction on obtaining long-term counseling, immediate structural and streetscape repairs, long-term blight remediation and improved street lighting, information on other social services, and anti-violence resources. The legislation also asked City Council to consider additional funding for 2 ongoing efforts, the Community Crisis Intervention Program and our grassroots targeted community investment grants. Both of these programs support community-based efforts to provide alternatives to violence and allow us to fund solutions that are located close to the problems. We've requested an additional $1.2 million for licenses and inspections for handling blight, specifically to increase the capacity of clean and seal abandoned properties that are too often used to hide stolen goods, drugs, and weapons. Finally, we're requesting an additional $300,000 for the Streets Department for additional neighborhood lighting upgrades. All of this underscores our commitment to improving the quality of life and safety for our communities. The Roadmap to Safer Communities calls on every city agency to do its part to promote safety and well-being. These investments only enhance those commitments. Only with long-term, continuous effort by all of us will we see long-term sustained results. And as I close, I just want to say thank you in advance to City Council for its careful consideration and for your ongoing leadership, and most importantly, for your partnership in tackling all of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Oh, good morning. Come on, guys. Good morning. All right. All right. First of all, I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to concur with the mayor and his sentiments with respect to the sense of urgency around this very, very troubling issue. And I want to commend the mayor because it's not lost upon me that 9 o'clock, 9:30, the day after the election, this is the first thing that's being discussed in a public way. Mayor, I want to thank you that you're sending a real message on it. And I want to thank the administration and my colleagues on council about understanding the need to expand the agenda as we address violence. It can't just simply be about law enforcement. We ask our police to do a lot, but we have to do other things, obviously. You know, we have to talk about criminal justice reform. We have to talk about expanding educational and real opportunities for individuals who find themselves going down that path. I'm glad that we're talking about taking guns off the street. I want to thank our law department and the DA and the mayors for moving on lost and stolen guns. We think that's a key component in terms of stopping straw purchases. Safe havens bill, dealing with rec centers. I want to thank our recreation commissioner who's working on that. Getting guns out of the hands of dangerous people. Councilman Jones, I want to thank you so much for that. And we are going to have to talk about while we're getting guns off the street, we're going to have to talk about getting individuals who have made a decision that they no longer want to be a member of this society. All right? We're going to have real talk about individuals who consistently create the level of violence in communities, and they are making that decision that they don't want to be a part of this society anymore. So they continue to go out, and time after time, they're caught with weapons, they're shooting people, little children, as the mayor said, can't be safe, can't watch cartoons. They probably shouldn't be out on the street. So we want to have that real conversation. So I just want to thank everybody who's involved in this. This message is sent today. We're going to deal with this issue in a meaningful way. With respect to the legislation that Mr. Abernathy talked about, City Council is always going to ask for more money because that's what we do. But we will have that spirited conversation. But at the end of the day, the one underlying thing that whatever dollars are made available, they will be for the purposes of protecting the citizens and giving people opportunity in the city of Philadelphia. So I just want to thank the mayor. I want to thank you, the managing director. I want to thank my colleagues and everybody involved for their very, very diligent work on this very, very important issue. Thank you.
So we know that we can't do this work without City Council's help, and we are grateful to Council President Clarke. At this time, we're going to call up two other champions with us from City Council, Councilman Kenyatta Johnson and Councilman Curtis Jones, who have been at the forefront with us on this violence prevention work.
So Election Day was yesterday. Today the work begins. I want to thank Mayor Kenney, who we see each other in passing sometimes in the course of doing our work. And there was one morning, one stressful morning after a bad weekend in Philadelphia, and he may not remember this. He was coming out, rushing to a press conference or some other form of work, and the look on his face, you may not remember that, but the look on his face of worrying about our children, often doing harm to themselves and others, was something that gripped me. And it made me go into the building and work a little harder. We have recently passed red flag laws that we don't know if they're going to get stricken down by the Commonwealth or the federal government or the NRA, but we don't care. We have the responsibility to do the right thing first in the city of Philadelphia and let the chips fall where they may. Thank you. President Clarke, my colleague Kenyatta Johnson, on a day off, went up to, Oaks, Pennsylvania. And we walked into a room where there was a gun show. And it reminded me of the movie Jaws. We took a step back. We saw from one end of the room to the other end of the room full of rifles, explosive shells from shotguns that when they hit the target, they blow up. Now, that ain't for deer. And what we saw that was disheartening was people taking those weapons, going out into the parking lot, and making secondary transfer. We took a step back and said, we're going to need a bigger boat. And what that means is that the proliferation of guns coming into our community is an onslaught. When at Baker Playground, 7 people shot, thank God none of them fatally, Commissioner, none of them fatally. But it reminded me of, I watched Unforgiven, a Clint Eastwood movie. Less people got shot in that movie than on that weekend on a playground. So this appropriations is a step in the right direction, a step in the right direction. We are putting our money where our mouth is. And clearly, just as clear as I can understand my mayor's economic development plan or his environmental green New Deal plan, which I actually read, I understand, and thank you very much, our anti-violence plan. And when we step up in with my colleague Maria, and we talk about this all the time, Councilwoman Blackwell, Kenyatta Johnson, we don't even watch the news the same way. After an act of violence, we pray for the soul that we may have lost. The second thing is, where did it happen? Because we're going to have a response to it. And our babies shouldn't have to worry about playgrounds. So this money is not one size fits all. We need to look at how, through the plan that the mayor's administration put together, how we appropriate and reappropriate and transfer ordinance monies to stop the bleeding and then come up with a long-term strategy. And with our partners in the community, we hope to have a better 4 years than we had in the past 4 years. And I want to thank you publicly, Mr. Mayor, for having a good head, but also having a good heart. Thank you.
I want to echo the sentiments of my colleague, Councilman Curtis Jones, and I want to acknowledge the work not only of the mayor, but most importantly his team, Vanessa and Shondell Ravel, who leads the Office of Violence Prevention. Give them a round of applause first and foremost, because it's their responsibility to implement the plan and implement the strategy as it relates to violence prevention here in the city of Philadelphia. I want to also commend the council president, District Attorney Larry Krasner, and the mayor and the law department for bringing forth a lawsuit around the issue of lost and stolen firearms. The same way that if someone steals your car, you have to call the Philadelphia Police Department and notify them, and you're held responsible if someone else is hit with their car, should be the same thing that happens if you lose your gun, because there are no Uzis or no 9mm made in Strawberry Mansion or Point Breeze. And the question is always asked in my neighborhood, where are these children getting these guns? And so I'm very optimistic about that effort, and I think it's a step in the right direction to hold people accountable who own firearms. And as a member of council, I also have a bill that deals with ghost guns. Most of you may not know, now you don't have to go to the store and purchase a gun. You can go to different stores and gun shows and buy parts of guns, put that gun together with no serial number, and use that gun in an act of violence. And so that bill strictly goes toward banning that practice here in the city of Philadelphia. I'll continue to negotiate, Mr. Mayor and your team, regarding a transfer ordinance that I put in. I think 5 is good. I think 10 is better, but nevertheless, we don't want to just also be providing funds without an actual plan. But we need to expand and making sure that young people have the opportunity to work year-round. We need to make sure when people come home from prison, they have opportunities to get involved in things that are positive, because if not, they'll go back to a life of crime and violence that we see taking place here in the street. But I want to acknowledge the work that has been done thus far. Some folks say, well, we're not doing enough, but I beg to differ. Prior to this administration, we had no money to give community organizations and nonprofits what we call boots on the ground to address this issue of crime and violence. Prior to this administration, we did not have an aggressive crisis intervention team, which now will be working from Monday to Sunday out on the street, focusing on preventing gun violence before a young man picks up a gun and takes the life of another young man. And so, again, I thank this team for setting us in the right direction. I believe we have a lot of work to do, because at the end of the day, we'll never be a great city until we're a safe city. We see a lot of cranes going up, there's a lot of economic development taking place, but if you can't walk down Center City without somebody taking a shot at you, or if my two toddlers can't go to the corner store without someone pulling out a gun and shooting up the middle of the street or shooting in the middle of the neighborhood, then what's the purpose of being a resident here in the city of Philadelphia? And so for me, this is not about politics. I'm a dad, I'm a father, I'm an African-American man who's tired and sick and tired of seeing African-American young men being murdered, and we have to be aggressive about this process. The same way Councilman Jones says, if a well washed up on the shores of the Delaware, excuse me, Tribune, the type of support that we would see to address that issue would be unbelievable. It's just the facts and the reality of what we're dealing with. And so at the end of the day, we have to be aggressive and save our babies and save our children. And Mr. Mayor and your team, I look forward to working with you as we move forward to strategize and expand the level of resources as it relates to addressing the issue of gun violence. Thank you very much.
So we want to thank all of our members of council. We also want to recognize Councilwoman Blackwell as well as Councilwoman Quiñones Sánchez, who also support us. So as you've heard, it takes everyone to make a difference and to tackle this problem of violence that we're experiencing in our city. In our city, it takes the government, definitely takes the community, it takes our police department, it takes the district attorney's office, it takes the Office of Violence Prevention, the Office of Criminal Justice, our Office of Reentry Partnerships. It takes everyone we can think of in this city to tackle this problem. And so we're asking you all to come together with us so that we can make a difference and ultimately save some lives. We are confident in our abilities that if we get together, we can do this and it will increase greatly. And with these investments, we will be able to have much more of an effect, we believe, in the community. And we thank our community partners who have been doing a terrific job. Many of our community partners received targeted community investment grants and have done some great work and really made a difference in their communities. At this point, we will open up the floor for questions. Those of us are here and will entertain any questions that you may have. Yes. Yes, we are looking for a mid-year transfer ordinance, yes. So the district attorney has been at the table with us. Some of his staff was here who are working with us. I did see them in the room. We are meeting very regularly, both with the district attorney, with State Representative Mavita Johnson-Harrell, and they have indicated that they are committed to this process as long as there are sufficient supports, social service supports, which were, I understand, some of the issue before when it was tried, as well as long as we are committed to trying to work on increasing job placement. So he is at the table at this point. So the first phase, if you will, some might call it a pilot. I would prefer to call it a phase because it will be a phased-in approach. We are talking about starting in West Philadelphia. And then we are determining where we start by the police department intelligence unit doing an analysis of data as well as a combination of a few other things into the areas where we think it is, one, needed the most, and two, where it will be most efficient or most able to be rolled out. We'd like to launch it in the spring. It is a gun violence intervention. It is one of the tools in the toolkit. It's not the only gun violence intervention model, but it is certainly one of the tools in the toolkit that we think will be very effective here. It is an evidence-based program, and we are working with David Kennedy, the creator of the model from John Jay College in New York. Sure.
And I just want to back Vanessa up on this one particular initiative because it was rolled out. It's called Focused Deterrent, and it was rolled out in the 17th Police District in Point Breeze, Grays Ferry. And what makes it most effective is it's the carrot and stick approach. And I'm a young man. I grew up in South Philadelphia. I know the streets. And the reality is you have to give young men an option, but also we can't be compassionate about individuals who are taking the lives of our young people, who are making our seniors live hostage inside their homes. And so at the end of the day, the program is a combination of the U.S. Attorney's Office, the District Attorney's Office, the Philadelphia Police Department, and also compassionate community residents who have been impacted by gun violence. And the young men participate in a call-out session. And in that call-out session, they're basically given the option of how to get involved in resources that change the quality of their lives or the consequences of not straightening up. And at the end of the day, I support criminal justice reform, but I also support our neighborhoods being safe. I support my children being safe. I support my family members who go to and from their homes being safe. So at the end of the day, we can't play around with this issue. If individuals want to get their lives together and get involved in something that's positive, here are the resources for you. But if you're not a part of the solutions in our communities, then you're definitely a part of the problem, and you should be dealt with accordingly. And I just want to back Vanessa up on that particular program because I was a part of it. It was very, very effective in the 17th Police District. Homicides decreased significantly, and I think West Philadelphia will be a great pilot, and hopefully with the buy-in from the Philadelphia Police Department, at some point in time, it'll go citywide because this is a very, very serious issue. Thank you.
Thank you. No, we're phasing, right? We're starting with West Philadelphia, but it will be phased into other portions of the city. Yes. Yes. So we understand that we would very much love to have you work with us and participate. You can work with our Office of Violence Prevention. I can see you afterwards to make sure I give you the contact information, and we can set up a meeting to talk about how you can work with us. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. So we work very closely with the Department of Behavioral Health, and they have a wealth of trauma-related resources. We can work with them to get that information out to you as we're trying to build a sort of resource the repository at any rate. But we will work with the Department of Behavioral Health, and we can get that information to you. So CCIP is our Community Crisis Intervention Program. I believe his question was around if we have not, we don't have data to directly show that it works or an evaluation yet. What's the logic behind putting more money behind the program? I will say to you that the logic for me, now we don't have data, you're correct. The program just started in July of 2018. So it has not been up and running long enough. It started with approximately only like 9 people. The outcry for their services, though, was so large that we have been, looking for grants. That's the state grant that you're referring to, as well as getting money from the mayor and this administration to expand it. If you go in the neighborhoods, the people in the neighborhood will tell you that they like CCIP. It had we put them out there as credible messengers. Most of these folks are employed. They come from the neighborhood that they actually work in, so they have an amount of credibility. It also adds some economy to that neighborhood by also giving people employment, right, that come out of that neighborhood. They try and they are very successful often at de-escalating situations that occur in the neighborhood. If they get wind of anything, they try to respond. If we think that some of our homicides are retaliatory in nature, and they try to cut off that retaliation. They do hospital-based intervention. They go to the hospitals. Often, sometimes there's things that erupt at the hospitals when the families get together and emotions are raw. They work with the police department and are able to get ground-level intelligence that sometimes the police department is not, because folks in the community may be fearful of talking to the police, but will talk to them because they know them. So I can only best tell you anecdotally it has working really well. If you talk to many of the police captains around the city, they will tell you that they believe in the areas where CCIP has really been able to be the heaviest, that they believe that they're starting to see some reduction in certain types of retaliatory type crimes and other type of violence.
So one of the investments that I didn't mention was actually a recognition of to improve our data analysis capacity. And so we are part of the transfer appropriations request is to build that capacity. I think we attempted to do some of that analysis internally, and we haven't been as successful as we'd like to be. And we recognize that, and we're trying to address it through additional funding so we can add those resources and expertise. Assuming the legislation is passed, we hope to see either a contract or staff brought on in the spring.
I'd like them to ban assault weapons and not make them available either for sale legally at a gun shop or for sale at a gun show. These weapons are not made for sport. They're made for killing. You couldn't shoot a deer with an AK-47. You'd tear up the game you're trying to bring down for food or whatever. It's just they're killing machines. And the NRA is not representative of gun owners. They're representative of gun manufacturers. It's all about greed. It's greed when it comes to opioids. It's greed when it comes to guns. It's greed when it comes to everything that's negative in our society. It's about money. And they need to figure out a way to get this done. I mean, until we reduce the availability of these weapons, I don't have an answer for that. I mean, we can continue to educate, to invest in education, to invest in prevention, to invest in police, to invest in all the things we invest in. But as long as the legislature and the U.S. Congress allows these guns in our society, we're swimming upstream. Yeah.
So one thing that the reduction is certainty of punishment. And we know that clearance rates in Philadelphia are lower than nationally. And we learned recently that the legislative department is spending a lot of that time doing vehicle stops that come up with.
Right. Well, we are working on our police interaction with our public. We've reduced pedestrian stops on the street by 200,000 or so. We've gotten more guns off the street. With that reduction, we've been aware now that the car stop situation needs to be addressed as well as the pedestrian stops on the street. We cannot develop a relationship between the police and community by having people feel like they're being harassed if they get in their car to drive. So we'll be working with the police commissioner to address that. We addressed the pedestrian stops because it was part of the lawsuit with the ACLU, and now this information has been brought to our attention, and we're addressing that. We're going to start addressing that now. Unless you have some positive result of a car stop or a ped stop, it shouldn't be stopped. The car or the pedestrian should not be stopped. And part of the clearance rate problem has been the issue of trust between the police and our communities. And yesterday we were out on 15th Street where that mass shooting of police officers took place in August, and they're all good, decent people who want to cooperate with the police, but they need to be able to trust the police before they're willing to cooperate. And I saw the interaction between the police officers there in the 35th District and the neighbors there, and it was positive and productive. And we need to continue to build that trust and build that relationship. And that'll help our clearance rates. I mean, look, anybody who has the capacity to shoot up a house with an AK-47 and kill a 2-year-old, I mean, that person obviously needs to be away forever. And we have to get in a situation where kids who are getting hopefully a better education because of our investments will be able to take a job that pays a living wage, that pays a sustainable wage, so they don't think about doing anything, on the street that we wouldn't want them to do. And it's a combination of things. I mean, I wish the state of Pennsylvania would thoroughly and fairly invest in education from pre-K to college, but they decide they don't want to. And we wind up dealing with the end result of those problems. I'm not whining. We're going to do what we can to fix it, but we're not getting a lot of help anywhere. So, all right.
So we're out of time at this point. We thank you all for coming. We thank you all for your continued support of our work. Some of us will be around for questions if anybody has any others. Thank you. Hey, how you doing?